shall I do? So we are going live. We are now broadcasting. This is the first time we're doing this on Zoom. We've been using a different platform before, but we've had a couple of the webinars where the shared screen image was just really fuzzy. And what we're not sure of is that just because everyone's at home on the internet, or is it the platform? So we're doing Zoom today.
And seeing as that is like 90% of what these webinars are about.
The screen share, yeah.
The screen share, yeah. We want to make sure that it's as crisp as possible.
Yeah, I understand that.
Just talking about virtual backgrounds. Will we see other people when they join? I guess.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, we've got 5 people. Charles, I think it's Yarek, and Jan, Roger, Warren. Now, what I don't know. Oh yes, you can raise your hands and say hello. If you didn't hear us already, this is the first time we're using Zoom for this. We're normally using different tech, so you can also say hi in the chat.
Okay.
Can you? Oh yes, I was right. It's Yarek, not Jarek. Can I?
Can you see people, or just can you see the list on the right?
No, I can just see the list.
Okay, fine. That's the same as me.
Yeah. I can see the myself, you, and Stephen, but I can only see the list. Yeah. So.
And do you want to test your screen share quickly, or as we're live, should we just go with it and hope that it works?
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Whether it's now or in 2 minutes when you've done your shortened ramble.
Hi, webinar case study. Welcome, Pete. Over to you.
So Charles is saying he can't see everyone, only 3 people.
Yeah, this is it's a webinar, Charles, and they're slightly different. You can just see the 3 handsome hosts.
Yeah, and you've got no audio option because we can turn off that you're muted when you come into the room, so you can quietly enter and not disturb everyone. Jean wants to know, where's the haiku? It's 3rd week running, Pete.
I'm not a
poet. He made a promise on the 2nd webinar that he'll do a haiku about running webinars, and he's yet to deliver.
I'm just, haikus, they need to gestate and kind of percolate. Yeah. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
You keep telling yourself that.
Yeah. Listen, if Peter would just shut up, I'd actually have a chance to say hi and welcome to, is it the 4th or 5th webinar, case study webinar that we've done? Where
no idea.
We seek to take an unsuspecting guest, a business owner, and we put him through the mangle or the mincer, and come out with a fully formed Macanta system at the end of it. So thanks for taking the time to be with us. Any questions that come up as we go, just feel free to put them in the chat there, and Peter will either answer them as we go, or address them all at the end. I'm particularly pleased about the guest that we've got on this evening, because when you start a business, the initial people that you reach out to and kind of talk to about it are your friends, your family, the other people that you know. And although Macanta as a product has been going since 2016 we started, Macanta as a standalone product, the system that we're going to be looking at today, has really only been around since the end of February. And all of the webinars to date have been with, I don't think there's been any family on, but they've certainly all been people that we've known from before. But Stephen Woodhead, who's on this evening, we knew nothing about him, and he knew nothing about us at the end of February. And yet somehow he found out about us. We made enough of a splash and created enough ripples when we launched for him to if not have his boat rocked, then at least get his feet a little bit wet to enough to want to get on a call with me and see if Macanta's a fit. Really interesting business. Really interesting it was for me anyway to hear how he's thinking creatively within the constraints of COVID-19 coronavirus that we find ourselves in terms of adapting his business and bringing forward plans that he had for his business, and I'm sure he'll share a bit of that as we go. So Stephen, really pleased to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
And just before I hand over Peter, perhaps just for the sake of those people listening now and later on when it's up in the case study vault, just to share a little bit about who you are, where you are, what your business is, and what kind of appealed to you about Macanta when you saw it enough to kind of get to where we are now.
Perfect. So, hello everyone. My name's Stephen Woodhead. I run a recruitment company called Scala Careers. We're a small niche retained search and selection company that specialises in the recruitment of sales and commercial professionals within the building products market. The thing that really attracted me towards Macanta when I saw it in the entrepreneur circle was how flexible it is and how the system develops with you as your business develops. And that's key for me, because where my business is today and where it is in 12 months' time, it needs to be, and hopefully is a very different beast. And your system can just grow with that without me having to send it back for development and consistently change and retrain. The system is just so flexible. And that, for me, that's the key. And it's easy to use as well, which is definite. The other thing is the automation, because you can automate everything. I can get the CRM to work to my system, so people, I hate using the word forced, but are forced to work to the way that we want them to work, because it's just done automatically.
Yeah, and that has a particular import with where you are taking the business. So you are at liberty to share about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at the stage now where we're ready to franchise the brand and to franchise the recruitment side of the business. So this system for me is key to that, because managing a franchisee is not always easy, whereas being able to do it when you've got a system that sort of dictates the way they work, it makes it easier for me, so I don't have to be on the phone to them all the time. We can just watch it from afar.
So you've got one app, one Macanta system, kind of almost with Chinese walls in between each of the franchisees. So when they log in, they think they've just got a system just for their franchise. Little do they know that Big Brother is in his chair in his kitchen, keeping an eye on what's going on.
Well, that's key, because I have looked at another 5 systems in total, and 2 of them was purely recruitment systems, and you can't do that with them because they're so unflexible and they are what they are. You can't change them.
Yeah.
And when you do change them, it's months of work, and it just sounds harder than what it's worth to do. I think the fact that you're not a specific recruitment system makes it better for me going forward.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in that. One of the things that Peter has said a few times is that with most CRMs, you're forced to use your term there, you're forced to run your business with a system that's being designed and implemented by people who know nothing about your business.
Exactly.
Which can be problematic at the best of times. And the other thing is that although there may very well be industry-specific tools and CRMs for a particular industry, and you've just commented that there's a handful in the recruitment industry, is that if you want different results from your competitors, you've got to do different things. So if you're using the same CRM and the same system, and you're running your business in the same way as everyone else that's using the industry-specific tool, then it's very difficult to innovate, within that. So I'm glad that a really important aspect of our messaging has got across. So that's great.
I think the key is what I said to everyone when I was do you remember when me and you had the first call? I said the same to you as I said to everyone else. I don't want to change my systems, my business's processes. I want the CRM to work with that. All of the fixed plug and play CRM systems, you have to change your processes. Whereas with yours, you don't. So that's key.
Cool.
Excellent. I told you it was worth bribing Stephen to say all that.
Yeah. Have I gone through all the scripts? Have I? I'm joking.
No, that's
We're
cool.
joking, everybody. If you
Yeah,
don't
we
know
are,
how me and
100%.
Peter operate up to now, then there's no hope. Joking. So Peter, over to you. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah.
Great. I'm really and when Peter got off his prep call with you, he was really excited about what we're going to be able to go through this evening. So it takes a lot to get Peter excited. So just ask his wife. No, you can resist.
Well, there we go. Here it is, everyone. Just gone.
Here it is. Yeah, it's cabin fever. It's cabin fever. That's it. That's all I can put it down to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my friend. Go on, take it away.
I'm going to share my screen. It's not going to be as interesting or exciting, but here we go. So just before I do that, just to give you an overview. So before this, a couple of days ago, Stephen sent over a basic outline of the mapping of the information that he wants to hold in the system and how that relates to different people. Some of those I've had to make some assumptions. So I've gone in and I've built out the outline of the system already, because there's probably, I think all in all, there must be about 60 fields in here already across the different data objects. And once you've seen me create or change a single field, then really you don't want to spend the next 20 minutes, half an hour on a webinar watching me create one field after the other.
It's not TiVo. You can't fast forward.
Yeah, it's not Netflix. So I'll share my screen and then show you what it is that I have built so far, and then Stephen, we can talk through that, look at what we might want to change, and then get into some of the more interesting things around the Macanta queries and the automation and stuff, rather than just the setting up of fields for that. Let me just see if I unmute you. Can I unmute you? No. There we go. So let me share my screen. And if this goes funny, it's the first time we're using Zoom. I'll say that again. So let's see what happens. Which screen can you see?
I can see your
Macanta.
screen. Yeah.
It's really crisp.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Cool. So that's fine. So across the information that you sent over, there's a few things that I think overlap, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. So you had contacts and candidates.
Yes.
But really, a candidate is always first and foremost a contact. They are a human, they're a human being in the system to begin with. The relationship that they will have to a vacancy is as a candidate. And you can also then mark them as being a candidate. If they've had one relationship to one vacancy, you know that almost the contact type that they are is that they're a candidate, rather than being someone who works at the company that's the hiring manager or someone higher up at the company. But structurally speaking, first and foremost, everyone is a contact as far as the system's concerned, because we first put the humans in and then we add all the stuff around them. So what you've ended up with, so you've got the basic layout, and this is just the contact at the top really, and then we can have notes and tasks. So that's the contact bit, and that's not, I mean, that's CRM details and contact details, and that's fine as it is. So what I've then done is I've created a section, a data object called additional contact info, which is then, in this instance, I could have this even if I'm not a candidate, because there's potentially information that you want to gather either way. I remember you do have a field, if I can see it. There was one for, are they already registered as a candidate as well? The default for that potentially can be no, because people start out as, well, I could be either, and therefore you decide that I am a candidate go from there. And we can more than likely automate the process that as soon as you connect me as a candidate to a vacancy the first time, that no becomes a yes automatically, and then moving forward when you look at it, that's where they are. So then alongside that, so that's sort of taking care of the humans and the human specific details, because my things like my date of birth, the personal overview, driving license, things like that, you don't really need to retain multiple versions and historical data of that. It's just information you hold on the contact, and it's almost like the front page of the file that's just set up by itself. Then we come on to companies, which from your perspective they're your client. They're the entity who is hiring you to find people. Now, alongside that, we can have different relationships with a company. So I can be the key contact, I can be the hiring manager. It depends on who's who at that particular company, and you can then create additional relationships, automate around that based on the relationship, moving everything around that, and then connect it to that based on the company name. We can then have vacancies where the vacancy is connected to the company, but then all your candidates will be connected to the vacancy, and perhaps your recruiter will be connected to the vacancy, so that you know who on your team is responsible for recruiting for this position.
Perfect.
And do that. So if we just whiz through some of these fields and the relationships and just see that they are broadly as you expect them to be, and then we can look at some of the other stuff that you want to do and how bits and pieces work, so I can show everyone a bit more. So if we go to relationships, these I just made up. So I just made up candidate, recruiter, key contact, and hiring manager. Are there any others that you can see that you may need either for a company or for a vacancy?
No, that's brilliant. Like you said, the good thing would be to have, oh no, we've got recruiter there, so everything's there. So you can see everything from one screen, and you can get to each thing from one screen as well, which is perfect.
Would it be worth adding a relationship of the candidate would change to once hired?
To placed.
Yeah, so create a, what would it just be called? Would you placed candidate? Would that be what it is? Or placed hire?
No, placed. So do you know, like when you've got on the options where you can have existing candidate, you could have placed candidate there as well to show that we've placed in that role.
Yeah, okay. So,
I should have thought of that actually. That's a good call.
Existing candidate and then placed.
Yes.
Because then you can see, well, actually, we put these 3 people forward, and this is the one who actually got the job.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can have that. So what I then just need to do, and that really only relates to the vacancy data object rather than any of the others.
Yes.
Okay, so. What I'm just doing here is adding our relationship. Placed candidate, there can only be one.
Yeah.
Hiring manager, can there be more than one for the same vacancy?
Yeah, because there'll be different people with influence over each project.
Okay. Key contact, would that play a role on the vacancy or only at the company level?
Just at company level, really.
So I can take that out. Then existing candidate, yes, we can have many. And recruiter, is there only one recruiter per vacancy?
Yeah, there should only be one per vacancy.
Okay, so we can leave that. That's fine. So just to explain to everyone, if you're not familiar with this, this is the section in Macanta where you come and essentially build your custom interface, build all the fields and field types and all the different rules. So if I just go in here quickly, and we'll come in for more of these, you get to set what the label is, the placeholder text, there's helper text you can put in, which for you, Stephen, where you say you almost don't want to use the word force, but you can guide people as to what to do and what certain things on the interface is for. So you can put helper text in that then says, it's a little question mark, and we can do some of that, but it's a question mark that then comes up on the interface that they can click, and it gives them instructions on what that field is actually for, what information. If you want to make sure they collect certain information in a field, you can give the instructions there, which is great for especially new hires, because you don't have to look over their shoulder and teach them exactly every step of the way. They can just follow the instructions that's baked into the interface.
Brilliant. Yeah, I can play around with that in my own time, can't I?
Yeah, you can add stuff in as much as you need. Then we've got field type, which is just a selection of what type of field you want it to be. Data reference, I'll come back to when we look at the relationship between companies and vacancies. Required fields, we all understand that. And then contact specific would be and may play a role for you. And the best way I can describe what contact specific does is that if we all go on holiday together, we book a flight, we all have the same flight number, departure time, departure airport, all of that. That's the same for all of us, but our seat numbers are different for everyone on the booking. So that's a contact specific field, because all the other values is the same for everyone, but I need to know what your seat number is and what my seat number is. So there may be places where that's appropriate for us to use that. Then the list header is just when you're looking at the data object at the top, a bit like a spreadsheet. What fields do you want to see up there pulled out of all the available fields, and in what order? And then we can add subsections and sections. So I'll go and show you the list header and the subsection. These are all just bits that allow you to customize the interface a bit more and break it up. So and there's a lot of, when you're building the system, there's a bit of what seems like back and forth and refreshing the page because you've made changes. But that's really just because you're building it and you need to make sure the entire system knows about the changes that's been added. Once the system is set up from the user's perspective, that's not necessary. But if we go here and we look, so this header here, by default, it's got the vacancy reference, the job title, and the company. That's just because they're the first three fields. We haven't said which ones we want and in what order. And then these here, vacancy overview, package responsibility, these things are just the subheadings that we added in that we can go through. So if we maybe start with the additional contact info, just before I carry on, are there any questions we need to deal with at this stage? Who came second or third, either for if it first fails or a similar vacancy comes up. That's quite an interesting point. I don't know if can everyone see the chat, or is it just me who can see the chat? You're muted, Stephen. Just me? Okay. So Charles was saying when we were talking about the relationships that there's potentially opportunity, and there's a risk sometimes to make things more complicated than they need to be, but where you can say, well, actually, this candidate came second and that one came third, because if another vacancy like it opens up, you want to make them available for that. But there's different ways that you can manage that depending on what you want, rather than create the complexity of additional relationships that keep changing for that. So if we have a look, we go through some of the assumptions that I had to make Some of it is how I've grouped fields together, because I know practically nothing about your industry and what you do. I've never been recruited, and I tend not to recruit anyone. So it's really just going through and seeing if there's anything that I'm completely wrong on the field type for it, so that we can just change that kind of thing. So for instance, things like the points on the license, I've deliberately made it a whole number field. You can't put anything other than a whole number in, because they don't issue half points. And we don't need an explanation. It's just how many have you got. Again, can we do the e-shot is just yes, no, already registered. Companies most interested in working for, I've gone with a text box because I can fill in multiple and a bit of information about that. Salary expectations, I was actually toying with the idea, do I put in low and high so that you've got a range of salary expectations, or whether that doesn't really matter, because it's, well, we all want to earn at the high end of of whatever scale we set for ourselves. So that's okay. And then, am I right in thinking, so industry, how many options are there likely to be? Because you said that is that the long list that you gave me in the one field?
Yeah, it's quite a tough one, that, because some clients will be quite specific to one or two industries, but then you've got some other clients that will have, say, 15, 20 different divisions that will operate across a whole different variety of industries.
Yeah.
So some of them, what I was hoping for there was like a drop down where you can just select, say, 5 or 10 different companies that type of thing.
Yeah, 5 or 10. Yeah, at the moment, the checkboxes are the only really way to select multiple, because if it's a drop down and you select multiple, the drop down closes after you select, so you can't see what is selected.
Okay.
But what you can probably do, and is it similar for the channel?
Channel's exactly the same, because most salespeople will be selling into a number of different channels. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think in that case, what I would probably do, and areas, is that geographic?
Yes. So, but we'd keep that simple. So what I'd do is I'd put northwest, northeast, that type of thing. I wouldn't specifically narrow it down to cities or anything like that.
Yeah. So I would then probably look at splitting the experience out as a section on its own, and I can show you how to do that. I think I've got on a text document your list of industries, so we can put that in, and then we can clearly see why we want those split out. And what I will do is then put experience in its own drop down like this. Brilliant. So that it's a section completely on its own, with those details in place, but then the general info, the current and most recent, because they are all, and then the social. Just explain to me, because it comes up a couple of times, MITs.
Yes, I tried not to put jargon in, but most important thing. So what's the most important thing to a candidate? Is it the company car? Is it the salary? Is it spending more time at home with the family? So that just needs to be an open, free box for me to type in almost word for word what the candidate's saying, so that when I'm relating back to them for a vacancy, I can pull on their strings and use the word they've used with me.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's cool. So I'm going to go in now, and I'm going to go and split out experience. Let me just see. Yeah, there's the list.
That's the one.
Yeah, so I'll go and split that out, because that is nasty.
Yes, I apologise.
That's okay, but we may find a better way of doing that.
And say, like, if a franchise comes in from a different industry, I can change that and work with them, can't I, for their section it off for them?
Yeah, because you can present different interfaces to different people.
Perfect.
It doesn't have to be just in one place. There's some bits you need to do around it to make sure you keep track of it, but yeah. So let's go in and we split out experience. So I just go to admin, to the connector, and it's on the additional contact info. And it starts with industry. Was that the first field? Current, most recent, industry. Yeah. So we'll go and split this out. And for the moment, I'll keep the section and the subsection the same. Actually, no, I won't. I'll call this, because we know it's long. And then, so by simply changing the section name and grouping them together in the same section that way, then the interface will change accordingly. Channel sold into, and area covered. I think that was the last one. So let me just see. I can now go to additional, and we now have an experience section that has the industry and then all the other fields.
Brilliant.
And that's how flexible the whole thing is. So I can now go in, and now we'll see. I'll start thinking overnight about what's a better way to present this. If the list is this long, it might be to make it scrollable or something, because you'll see what's going to happen here is the industry field is going to be very long.
Yeah.
And it'll be better if it can scroll. Someone smarter than me can make that happen. I just come up with the ideas. So we've got those in there. There we go. There you are.
Brilliant. That's exactly what I wanted it to look like, so that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's a very long list. So we'll make a note, we'll do some clever work so that it actually truncates it, but then you can scroll within the field and select multiple options rather than just displaying it unwieldy like that. But at least you've got all those there. But then with the other sections being split out like that. And would you say channel sold into would contain essentially the same list?
No, the channel sold into would be, I'd say, probably a 10 to 15 lines.
Okay.
That's all. It wouldn't be anything compared to that.
Yeah, so what I probably would do in that instance in any case is I would go and say, we go and find that and we move it over into a third column just so that it's channel sold into. And here I'll say, now that you've asked about it, Charles, yes, it will. The field as long as that, because drop downs, we already do that when you click on the drop down and it's a long list, you start typing and it takes you to the first option that starts with a letter that you typed. So we could do that with the scrollable checkbox as well, he says. But that would be a really good way to do it, so that when you are faced with, oh, I've put it in the wrong place, I'll go and fix that. But yeah, so if you're here, there will be a search field at the top and you can start typing and it'll either jump or narrow the list so that you can just select the ones that you actually want. Let me just go and fix my mistake. So if it wasn't obvious, what I did wrong there is I changed both the subsection, was it for this? No.
The one above channel sold into, wasn't it?
Channels. I sorted both of them to be channels and channels, whereas it should really be subsection is channels. But here we are still in experience. There we go. And channels as they moved over. So if there are 15 in that list, then again, you can see the bulk of it in one view and go from there. But that just gives you a really good idea of how flexible the interface is, and you can put headings in. So if we go, let's say we add some helper text for the industry, and just to give an example, if we go back here, so I'm going to put you on the spot and give me something to type.
So I just type in, what products do they specialize in selling?
Okay, so there's a Markdown guide. You can use Markdown to add bold and headers and bullet points and everything like that. So you can have quite extensive instructions that will display quite clearly. And then if I go and save, then we now see under industry. Did I put it under industry? Did I save that?
I'm sure you did, yeah. I think you did.
So let me go in and set this up. I'm going to be, that's a long list. Let me go back. I did indeed. We may have just found a bug. Doing demos with animals, children, software.
I fall into all of those categories, I'm afraid.
But yeah, it looks like that is a bug. So, but what would happen in an ideal world is there would be a question mark, and it's deliberately in an orange background. It stands out from the rest of the interface, so that you click on that, comes up with a pop-up and just says, what is it you want to do? I can show you an example in the old iteration, just so that you can see this. This is a monster interface that's not been moved over to the new one yet. And Zoom has taken a while. So in the old interface, it's green, and it then comes up as a pop-up. So it only shows for the fields where you've put it in, and you can then give instructions based on what you need people to do. And to just show you how far that goes, and it'll be back working tomorrow. Have they got any more? No. So I'll go back to it. So yeah, so probably when you log in tomorrow, that'll be there. We'll go and find the bug and get that sorted out. But that's what you can then do. And obviously for fields that don't need it, you just don't put it in and the question mark doesn't appear. But it just makes it easy for you to train people and to manage it that way. And like you could see, I could add myself here, existing candidate. For that, I've only set up one relationship for the contact info. we probably need to change, because I will always be, to my own additional information, I'll always be the key contact. And there can only be one. So therefore, there's strangely, which normally for Macanta we don't have, there is a one-to-one relationship between the contact and the additional contact information. But then any of those contacts can then be connected to multiple companies and or vacancies. Okay?
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question while you're doing this? So if I had a contact or a candidate, whatever, if I had a person onto the system and then I put down that they're currently working at company A, will that automatically create a relationship with that company?
No, because the companies as they're set up here, so this company field up here is me, the human, and it's the company that I'm at. Whereas the companies, if you got set up here, would be the client. You mean specifically in this instance, you mean the hiring manager or?
Yeah, anybody, yeah, hiring manager, anybody that's got some sort of decision-making capacity. If I add them to the system, will they automatically add to the company?
No.
Okay, so how do I do that to create that relationship so that they're automatically connected?
So you would, for an automated side, I'd have to think about how we do that, but we should be able to automate that for you based on that field value. But from a manual perspective, all you need to do, so if I go in, I'm going to add Pete. And I'll just say, so once you then save that contact, it brings the contact up, and I can then go in and connect him to a company. So in this instance, I think our company already exists, so I can say connect existing connector data, and here you can see Macanta Software Limited is there, and I can say, well, he's a key contact.
Perfect.
And now what you'll see is when we look at Macanta Software Limited here, let me just refresh that. When you look at Macanta Software Limited, I think I'm connected to it as well, so you should be able to see that, and it makes it easy for you to go between contacts within a company and keep reference on who's involved. So we can see down here, I'm another key contact. I could be the hiring manager. There could be different people that you connect to that company. And then when it comes to the automation side can also acknowledge the relationship. So let's say there's an automated email that you want to have go out, but there's a key contact and a hiring manager, but it's a notification email to the hiring manager. You set it up so that the email goes out when it should go out, but only to the hiring manager. And there can be a different email to the key contact, and you've got complete flexibility over that for it. So if we then look at that, so here we've got a company, Macanta Software Limited. Let's say we go and add a vacancy that relates to that company. So Macanta wants to hire someone. So I can go in and say, add a new vacancy. And vacancy reference I'll show you where we set up the automation. We'll do that on this webinar, but that will be auto-calculated, auto-generated once you save. So let's say job title is engineer. Macanta Software Limited is an option in this drop-down. So that links the two, and then I can say that I'm looking at Peter's contact. So just to be clear, I'm looking at this contact here. So that's who I'm connecting, and I'm going to say Pete is the hiring manager for this vacancy. Okay?
Yeah.
So now he's got that relationship. We can gather all the details, put all of that in, and we can set up automation. But this drop-down list here, which is the reference field that you have an option in Macanta for, that will grow as you add companies in. So every time you add a new company into the system, within vacancies, those companies become available as options.
Perfect.
In here. So it's a dynamic list that just keeps growing as you have them. And therefore you have the option when you do a search, you can search by the company name and it'll show you all their vacancies in the results. And you can then go and do what you need to do and select the right one for that. But that's how you would have those available. And of course you can search by any of these fields. So if you search for a criteria, then all the vacancies will come up that have what you've searched for in at least one of the fields.
Perfect. When you're doing those searches, can you search between, say, if I want to search for companies with these key criteria, can you change what you're looking for, or is it going to bring everything up in your system?
It'll bring everything up, but it splits it into, in your case, it'll split it into the groups. So there's a header with these are the companies, these are the vacancies. They're not mixed in together, so it's quite clear for you to be able to see which one it is that you're looking at for that. So you wanted, if we do some automation, you wanted both the candidate reference, the company reference, and the vacancy reference to be auto-generated.
Yes.
So we can go and have a look at this. And the function I'm about to use here was only meant to come out probably next week. But we've pushed it out this morning so that we can use it here and you can see it because it's there. There's stuff we want to add to it, but what we need for here is there. So if I just go and make sure that this company doesn't have one. And you can see here, for instance, company name on the vacancy, we've made a required field.
Yeah.
So you can't save a vacancy without linking it to a company, which should save some hassle. So the bit in Macanta that we're going to use for this is inside automation. We've added field actions, and there's a growing list of function that we're adding. Sorry, Pete's just given me a notice to check the Q&A. Let me have a look. Let's see if I can find the Q&A. Okay. Can you hear me, Pete? Yeah. You're muted. I can see there are two things in Q&A, but when I click on Q&A, nothing happens. So you've obviously seen something. Do you want to unmute yourself and speak?
I'm trying to unmute myself the whole time, but you have control.
Ah.
Yeah, it's just the Q&A function is, people are asking questions in the chat, but there's also a Q&A function. And there were just a couple of questions in there that Eugene asked half an hour or so ago. So I didn't want him to think that we were...
Well, can you see those questions?
Yeah, can you not see the three questions?
No, when I click on Q&A, it tells me there are three things, and when I click on it, now.
Huh.
I'm expecting it to bring up questions for me, but it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay, we'll circle back to them, Eugene, when we're next on the part of the interface where your questions relate to, we can address it.
Okay. Just while I see quickly, don't know if you will cover it later, but how does the system understand invoices raised, i.e. that a candidate has been placed successfully and the company has been charged for a certain vacancy when candidate Mr. X started? Okay, so by default, the system doesn't, because we're not an accounting function. So how we and this is a very strong part of the ethos of Macanta, is that we are a box of Lego, and we have as open an architecture as possible so that you can plug in best of breed, because we have the engineering skills to create an accounting function. It's not beyond it, but there are accounting functions available that's far better than anything we're going to come up with, because they've got all the experience we have with what we've built, they've got specifically with the accounting function. So we'd rather leave it to them. So in our business, for instance, we use a platform called ChargeBee to do recurring billing, and that goes via Stripe and everything. But that is for us integrated into our own Macanta app, so that when someone signs up for Macanta, they're created as a customer in ChargeBee. That customer ID gets populated back onto their information in Macanta. And then when our monthly billing, we've got a monthly automation in Macanta that during the month is tracking how many users log into a particular app. And that then via a script goes out to ChargeBee, generates the invoice, and the client gets billed. So for us, the finance function is deeply integrated into our Macanta, but it's not a part of the software, because there's best of breed accounting and billing packages that we'd rather plug into a system than try and replicate and sort of overcome the hurdles and make the great innovations.
And that's true of everything: document signing, affiliate management, anything that you can think of solving a problem in your business. If there is a company out there that's well funded, that's had a lot of research and development and a lot of engineering effort gone into it to solve that particular problem in the same way that Macanta solves the problem that it solves, then just plug it into Macanta.
Yeah. Agreed. You shouldn't be an accounting software, but would be nice if Macanta knew that an invoice hasn't been raised. Yes. So that would, the short answer to that is you would build in a function that on that vacancy, when a candidate gets changed, when the role gets changed to placed rather than interviewing, when it changes to placed, at that point, a bill needs to be generated. So that can be an automated function that at that point either creates a task for someone to go and raise the invoice, or you can automate the raising of the invoice. And then again, when that invoice is paid, you can reference it back to Macanta if you need to do that. So what you're describing, Charles, is entirely possible. It just needs a bit of Lego building to make it happen. But with our open API, and hopefully the open API of whatever billing you're using, that's all possible there. So I'll carry on with the automation. So if we first go, just a brief description of how we build automation in Macanta. We work on a very simple if this, then that function. That's all there is. If this happens, do that. If this doesn't happen, go and do that. And you can set those things up. So those are really driven by your trigger conditions. Under what conditions should I trigger an automation? And your trigger actions is then, well, for this condition, which action should I trigger? And you'll see when we build this, the thing to remember is you can go and build, just like Lego, you go and build loads of conditions and you can build loads of actions, but you can sort of cross-pollinate them. Just because you've used a condition and a trigger once doesn't stop you from using that same condition with a different trigger later, or a different condition with the same trigger. You can mix and match. As once it's there, it's a building block you can use as many times as you need to for that. So I always start the building automation from the right of the screen to the left. And as I build it, you'll see why that is. So the first thing we want to do is a field action. We want to generate a unique ID for a contact. the field was called candidate reference, which probably should change to contact reference, because I may be a key contact at a company, I'm not necessarily a candidate. So we can show 2 bits of automation here, because I'm going to change that field while I'm talking. Because within the system, each contact has a unique contact ID. So there's no reason for us to generate an additional ID as a reference number. It's their contact ID, so we can just auto-populate that, and we'll look at that. But then for the companies and the vacancies, we'll generate a unique ID specifically for those. So maybe just go and change this field. And if at any point I'm talking rubbish or you have questions, Stephen, just give me a shout.
Yeah, I'm just making notes as you go along so that I can sort of play around with this myself after. And
we are recording this as well, and that'll be up on the site tomorrow. And you
perfect.
Because then you can pause and see what happens and do that. So first thing we want to do is essentially, so for instance, for Pete's contact here, the contact ID is 5. So I want that 5, that number, to appear automatically in the contact reference field. Okay. So we go to our automation. And in this instance, I don't need to use a field action yet. I'll go for a trigger action, and I say set contact reference. And the naming of these functions, I always try and stick to, because we work on an if this, then that process. You want the sentence to make sense. So if, we'll come to that, then set contact reference. So that it's a sentence that works, because then when you look at it on the screen, it's very clear what's doing what and what's actually going on. So in this instance, we know that it's additional contact info is what I want there. I'm not going to assign an email, I'm not going to assign a field action, and I'm not going to assign an HTTP post at the moment. We'll look at what that is. The relationship we've only got key contact, so I can select that. So what would happen in this instance is, because we're going to merge a value, we want to merge the value that's part of the key contact, rather than if there was a hiring manager as well. I don't want the hiring manager's number in here, I just want the key contact's number in here. So I can then go and say, what I'm essentially doing here is I'm going, did I refresh? Yeah, contact reference. Now I'm saying to it, I want the contact reference to become a particular value. So I now know that there's documentation for this as well, that I can go contact.id with the squiggly lines, and that's a merge value. So when this runs, whatever the contact ID is, it'll write into that field. So let me save that. And if I'm going too fast, Pete can see questions, I see me can't, just tell me to slow down. So now I want to set up, under what condition do I want the contact ID's number to be filled into that place. Just give me a second. I'm trying to unmute you, Pete. Do you mute yourself?
Yeah, it looks like when I mute myself, you have to unmute me. I don't know whether you can give me different.
Yeah. If you cannot mute yourself, so that if you want to talk, you can just talk. Okay. So now we're setting up under what circumstances.
Well, I was just going to ask a question on behalf of other people. What if the contact ID already exists as the contact ID? Why are we putting it into a separate field?
Because the separate field is a value on a data object. Yeah. So we know there's a contact ID, and actually, in fact, other than in the URL, we don't display that ID on the contact information. But because we've got this data object for additional contact information,
and there's a one-to-one match, so we know that the additional contact data object is always going to relate to that contact.
Yeah.
Because ordinarily that wouldn't be the case, would it?
Yeah, but you can ordinarily you would have it as a contact specific field.
Yes.
If there's going to be multiple people connected, and then you can still do it. But here we've got a one-to-one relationship. But it's because we want a unique identifier for that is human friendly. Because if we look at the here, when I add a new one, and can I put anything here? I was born yesterday. Key contact. Just save that. Well, Pete was born yesterday. I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, you can see here there's an item number here next to ID. That's in the back of Macanta. No human's ever going to find that to be a useful. It is unique to that, but it's just not very human friendly. Whereas just a short number, it's just much easier to keep track of. And to reference on documents, because if someone rings up and say, well, my contact reference is 3675, that's a lot easier than saying my contact reference is item underscore K8RRCI34. I mean, we're not...
Might work for you, seeing as you're a robot, but most normal human.
So I hope that answers the question. So back to our condition, I'm now going to say, if contact reference is null, that's the condition. If there's no number in there, I want to populate it with a number. I can say restart after 1 minute. Therefore, if anyone deletes that number, it'll go back for that. It's going to specifically apply to additional contact info, specifically to the key contact relationship, similar to the action. And then I'm just going to go and find my contact reference and select is null. So now I've got my two building blocks. I've got, if the reference is null, set the reference to the ID number. So I'll refresh, and then we'll go and connect those two. Back to automation, and now I can go into my automation groups where you can piece these things together. So first I'll create a group which is called so I know, excuse me, any automation that I'm going to build that relates to the additional contact info data object type, they're going to come in here. And you can have as many sections as you like. I can turn the group on or off, but I then say if contact reference is null, then set contact reference, turn it on, and save. So the system runs every few seconds or so to go and see, is there anything that meets that condition? Is there an additional contact info data object out there that field is null? If it finds one, it'll trigger this automation and run it. So let's see what we've done. If I've made no typos, we should see a 5 in the field. So impete data object, ta-da, as if by magic.
Well, my next trick.
So that's you can get really complex with the conditions and the actions, and then you can add in, well, when this condition is met, if I show you on the screen, you can come in and you can say, okay, when this condition is met and you trigger this action, also send this email, also perform this field action, also send this information via an HTTP post to an external system. So you can quite, with what's on the face of it, really simple building blocks, you can get something quite complex going quite quickly that can, like you say, you want the system to adhere to your workflows, not change the workflows of your business because of what someone's programmed into a system.
So So when I change the interview to the vacancy to first stage and add the candidates, I can get that to automatically generate an email to the hiring manager and to the candidates, confirming the details on.
And the good thing about it is you can for that same action, you can trigger 2 different emails to the hiring manager as you would to the candidates.
Because we take account of the relationship between the contact and the data.
It's different. Yeah. Do you have a sort of a glossary or a booklet where I can, do you know, like the terminology that you use, null and all these different words? Do you have a glossary that I can use so I can pick and play and sort that myself?
Yeah, so when you log into the app, you'll see at the bottom, there's the knowledge base. And when you go in there, it's not at the moment outlined as a glossary, but when you go and look, you do a search for relationship, it'll show you all the videos and articles on relationship, and those have all the details in them.
The glossary is not a bad idea, actually, because we do mean particular things by using a certain word. So to avoid any confusion and ambiguity, yeah.
So no, we can certainly create that. So we know we want to create a unique reference for the company and a unique reference for the vacancies as well. Now, those are not specific. We can't use the contact ID because we'll have multiple people connected, and I want the same ID. And so in this instance, we need to generate an ID. So we come over in automation still, we come over to field actions, and we say we're going to add a new field action. And I'm going to say generate company reference. There's always the description box if you need to put more details in. I'm going to do this for companies. The action type, now this list is growing, there's another 7 or 8 things coming here, but the action type we want is a ticket number, because that's going to generate a unique number. You can, if you go, for instance, addition, then you can say, I want the value in this field added to the value in this field and the result written into that field. So you can do bits of calculation there. Ticket number, you'll see how it works. Action counter is, let's say you log phone calls. You can then have, for instance, every time a phone call is booked via something like Calendly or whatever, and it's fired at this record, you can count they've booked another call, increment the field every time something takes place, whatever that something is. And then the how old, how long is really just looking at a date. So you can, for instance, if you want to track efficiency and you want to say, well, okay, on average, we place candidates within X amount of time, you can add a field to the vacancies that says date the vacancy went live, and then you can run on a daily basis or however you want, you can run this how old, how long to a second field that'll then tell you how, when I look at it, how many days and hours, how many months, whatever it is, since that original date. So at a glance, you can see this vacancy is 6 weeks old. And
then you can obviously, when you've got that in a search result, you can sort by that field. So you can sort by, recency of vacancy, adding a vacancy to the database.
And it also allows you, so for instance, how that actually came about is someone wanted to work out how old the contacts were. Now, it's easy enough to ask someone, what's your date of birth? But so then this will then calculate, well, actually, this is how old they are. And you can then say, okay, well, once a year, update it, or run it every day. And you can say, well, if it's important, you are so many years, so many months, and so many days old. And you can decide what you want to do. So that's where the name comes from. So we're going to use ticket number. So ticket number, we then set up. So I'm going to say, okay, what is the first number you want to use in this instance? So like with invoices and things, you don't necessarily want to start at 0, whatever you want. So for example, let's just go with 1001, but I can add a prefix to it as well. So in this instance, I would just add COM hyphen, so I know it's a company reference number rather than a vacancy reference number or anything else. And the field I want that to be put into is the company reference number. Okay. So what that's going to do is every time this runs, it'll look for the next available number and write it into that field. And it logs what numbers have been used. So it's always the next available. So I can save that. What have I done? Relationship in this instance is going to be the key contact because I only want to have it run once. That's fine. So save that. So that's my field action. Now I need to go and set up, because the trigger action is what carries the field actions. Okay, you always need a trigger. You can't go from trigger condition to field action. It's trigger condition, trigger action, and then it's a bit like a fighter plane. You load it with a payload of what it is that it's going to use when it fires. So we'll add another one, and I tend to call them the same. Unless it's an email I'm sending, then I'd say send whatever it is. But in this instance, we're generating that. And I can again say, right, it is for companies. It is for the key contact. And in this instance, I don't need to set a field value because my field action is going to update the correct field. I can, of course, set other fields at the same time, but in this instance, we'll leave it at that. So now we've set up our field action and our trigger. We have to say under what conditions do we want this to be set. So we're going to say again, if company reference is null. Again, there's a debate here. Do I want it to ever redo it? Or do I want, if that field is null, it gets stripped out and it runs again. My vote is you run it again because there's little value in having a reference field that has no value. If someone for some reason deletes it, you want one generated so that you've got that. But we do allow the functionality where you can separate out a field or fields like that into a section of that data object and give your staff read-only access. So the system will calculate that reference and fill it in. They can see it and they can quote it and they can work with it, but they can't actually delete it. They can't change the value.
For my money, just thinking about it from a systems perspective, is that once, generally speaking, once something has been assigned a unique ID, that unique ID should never change, because if it's referenced anywhere else, if it is deleted and regenerated, it's going to be a different number. Yeah. So I would vote for never rerunning it, but making sure that that field value is not editable by a human. It's a system value. It can be seen, but it can't ever be changed by anybody.
Yeah. So let's leave it on never, and we're going to say it's for companies, and it's for the key contact, and then I'm going to say company reference number again is null. So we save that. Now we've created our building blocks. We do need to refresh so that it can pull all the bits together.
Yeah, so you haven't added the field action to the trigger action. But
no, because it only becomes available as an option after you've refreshed. As does the pairs for the automation group, so I just always leave it to last, so I only do one refresh.
One refresh, got it, makes sense. Click from the top, man.
Trigger action, generate company reference. I can now go assign field action, and my option is now there to choose. So I go and save that. Then I go to my group. I'll create a new group for companies. And I say, if the company reference is null, and generate company reference. Save that. And let's just go and see, do we have a company? Yes. And the reference is null at the moment, so that'll now, in a moment, in the background, go and generate that. I'm going to grab some water. Any questions?
Yeah, now might be a good time to answer Eugene's question just in terms of interface. But before we do that, what would you say to anyone that might be looking at this and just saying that seems like quite a lot of setup to do something that's quite simple? If someone did say that, how would you respond?
I suppose it's really difficult for me because, I mean, everything that was in place here when we started the webinar took me just over an hour to build.
Okay.
So it's because I know it, for me, it's just not a lot to do. I mean, the interface that I showed you, the helper text on, that interface has, I think it's now 330 fields in 12 different sections, all with at least 4 groups per section. And I think we're up to about 600 automation functions in the background. So it's yes, you've got to set it up, but for my money, the time investment and the understanding you'll have of your business, weighing that up against the training you don't need to do, the repeat work you don't need to do, and the fact that the system actually helps you to run your business and guides your staff to do in your business what you want them to do, I'll do the setup all day long.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing of what you said there is the thinking about your business is that you can't configure and set up Macanta without thinking deeply about your business and the business of your business, and that means the kind of the service that you want to deliver to your customers, and the experience that you want them to have.
Yeah, but there's a key part to that as well to keep in mind. And there's our number. So 1001 was taken from my test this morning, but you can see there we've got the new one, 1002 has been put in place there, and that'll now just go up for each of those.
I think the other key is it might be a lot of work while we learn to do it, but once we've done it once, that's always going to get populated.
Yeah.
So in a month's time, that works nothing, as opposed to having to do that every time you put something in.
Yeah.
It's the classic cancer with a 2-minute task, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's also, the other side is what you said about the real thinking about the business. The big advantage with doing it this way is your thinking will change in 6 weeks' time or 6 months, and then the system you've built can change along with that. So we do it constantly in our own business, and if we come up with an idea and say, oh, we want to track this and we want to do this with it, we just go in and we build it and it's done. There's no, and that's even though we have a team of developers, we don't need to go to a developer to make those things happen. We get the developers to build the Lego so that we don't have to ask them to do these things in our business. And that's the thing is, yes, you want to at the outset think clearly about your business, but also keep in mind, we're not pouring concrete here. You can go and change that. If you decide for whatever reason, 12 months from now, you want to change the prefix on company reference number, either because you want a line in the sand, you've taken on investment into the business and you want to say, okay, I want a clear division between past customers and customers from this day forward, you just go into the automation, you change the prefix, and from there on, the number will still keep counting, but the prefix will change for any new companies created.
And guess what? Let's say you also decided that you wanted to change it to, rather than being COM, to be company and a number, and you wanted that to apply to everyone, then you just go and set up another role. It says, where company reference starts with COM, change it.
So yeah, there's no doubt. It's for me, it's the same, and I keep coming back to Lego. I've got 2 daughters, 7 and 9. The toys they get that's pre-built and just does one thing is in the cupboard soon after being delivered. But the stuff that allows them to experiment and build and change and move and do this and that, they're constantly using it. And it's the same in a business. If you've got, well, this is what you can do and this is all you can do, if you decide to change your business or you outgrow it, you've got to change the systems in your business wholesale in order to get to the next level, rather than, well, we're just building it as we go, one piece at a time. The whole system grows and changes with the business.
Well, we have got this screen up, and I'll click here, and I'm going to answer it live. Eugene said the social media URLs, is it possible to just hold the username in the field? Like the Twitter URL is normally set as like at and someone's name without the generic front part of the URL, or is it best practice to store the entire URL?
I would say it depends. So in this instance, I stored the URL because when Stephen sent the details over to me, it was specifically the field title was LinkedIn URL rather than Twitter handle or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it does just depend on, and that's the advantage of this. These are URL fields, so therefore there's a format that the information needs to go in, but then that allows you to click on this little arrow and it'll open it in a new tab, and away you go.
And that was actually Eugene's follow-up question. He said, does that cool little URL hyperlink arrow, does it generate automatically next to the social media links? And you just answered it there, that it's any URL field.
Yeah, but only if it's a URL field, and then you need it to have the whole URL. But there's ways that you can do this, because you can say, well, actually, for Twitter, you can decide where you do it. Let's say someone fills in an online form and you ask them for the Twitter handle. Well, you can then concatenate, because we've got the functions to do that I supply you with the Twitter handle minus the @ so just my Twitter name, but you then auto-populate twitter.com/ and that bit, so that here I can click the link and get to the Twitter page. But it's not reliant on me or any human to actually type in the whole twitter.com bit. Now, it doesn't work so well for Facebook or LinkedIn because the handles aren't the same. But yes, if this was, so for us, and I save that, then when I click on that, it just opens up in the new tab. And then I can go close that, carry on with the work I was doing, and move along. Okay. So let me go and set up the vacancies automation quickly, and then you can see that.
Just narrate as you go through, Peter, so people can follow.
Okay. I was off. So again,
just where you are on the screen, just so people can follow.
Yeah. So we want to generate a vacancy reference number. So in this instance, the connected data object is going to be vacancies. The relationship, I now have to decide, but I'm likely to first connect the hiring manager. They're likely to be the first contact you connect, because they come to you and say, I need someone. It's not going to be a candidate you connect first. When you create the vacancy, you will have a hiring manager who brought it to you, or so we're going to do it on the hiring manager's relationship. And then we go for ticket number again. And in this instance, we can go for the same number because it's a different instance. And we can say VAC, and then we're going to go vacancy reference, save that, go to my trigger action and set up my action ready for the payload, vacancy. hiring manager. And
Actually, seeing you go through now at speed,
and I'm having to talk as well.
Yeah, when you know what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. It's like anything. If you know what you're doing and you've done it loads of times, then it's not as much work as it was when you first learned how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only thing that doesn't work with is drinking beer. The first pint always goes so much faster than any subsequent pint. For me, at least. Do you remember those days when we could go to the pub?
I've been married 10 years, so I don't remember them days.
Your secret's safe with us, Steve.
So I'll create another group to keep them separate.
I'm going to tie it all together, yeah. So vacancy reference is now going to generate a vacancy reference. Turn it on, save it, boom. What did that take you? 2.5 minutes? Is that?
Yeah. If.
With a little bit of talking, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's no denying to have a system that does exactly what you want it to do. There's work to do, but it's not nearly the amount of work of either changing your business to fit into the software you've chosen, or to go and roll your own and hire a couple of developers and say, well, can you build me a system, please?
Yeah.
So
I'm quite cognizant of the time. It's an hour and a half. So I know one of the things that you did want to highlight in this webinar was the field action, which is a new it's just been released into Macanta. And there's obviously more work to do in here to get Stephen fully up to speed and have something that franchisees can log into and whatever. But is there anything that either you, Peter, or you, Stephen, definitely wanted to cover on this webinar to sort of store it for posterity's sake?
That's perfect as far as I'm concerned. That even the work you've done on the industries, I can just copy that across onto the other contact on the vacancies and the.
Yeah.
So I can do that myself now because I've seen you do it, and I'll just copy that across.
Yeah.
So no, as far as I'm concerned, that's good. I just need to play around with it now and do the searches and see how all that works. But
yeah,
the good thing is I've got plenty of time to do that during lockdown. So
well,
now's as good as ever.
What we can do, because it really won't take all that long, is show you the save searches, the Macanta queries. So you
haven't shown that at all in any other webinar. So
no. So you've got the option to search for something, and then you get a few results, and you pick the one you want. But for instance, for your recruiters, potentially, you want them to come in on a Monday morning, pull down a list, and start calling.
That's right.
That kind of thing. So let's say we want, new candidates.
New candidate leads, yeah.
Yeah. We can give it a description, of course. It's going to be in relation to vacancies. And then I've got, again, like I've got for automation, I can build rules and I can say, okay, this is going to be for, let's see, what can we use as an example? If we go for industry, then I need to give it an option. So for the moment, I'm just going to go with one. So you can get an example. But I can say here, and I can just, if I want to say 2 or 3 industries clumped together, I can just comma separate the options and away I go. And I can also say and or, I've got different rules, and I can say for, let's see, what can we pull up that's easy? Managing, and I can again say is not null, okay? So this is going to be for something in adhesive tape, and there is a managing element to the role that they're recruiting for. These are terrible examples, but you can delete it and we can build something that's useful. And in this instance, I want it to be for candidates that I want to see, and I can choose the user, and in this instance, it's the person logged in to the system. I can choose that the user has a particular relationship, so I want it to be the recruiter is either one of us or the logged in user. So you can restrict it so that when recruiter A logs in and pulls down that list, they only see the candidates that they have a recruiter relationship with.
Perfect.
But then you can create a management rule where you say, well, it's any, and therefore when you pull down the list, you see all the candidates. Okay, so I'll leave it
because you've been assigned that safe search. You don't assign that safe search to anyone else.
Yeah.
And then for here, I'll just add, and what did I use? Industry can go in, and I'll move that down. So then I can save that. Now, we are unlikely to have any results just because of what we are, but I can just show you where that then lives. So we've created our search. We go back here. And on the main page, and this is about to be moved to another section of the interface, but here I've now got new candidates. I pull that up, it shows me the list. And what we've got, this is not a good example to show it to you, but we've got inline editing, so that when these results come up, if there was a result here, you've got the same editing functions you've got available on a spreadsheet. So let's say, for instance,
we can pull up our app and just show the welcome videos or something.
Yeah. So if I go here and I go there,
because funny enough, we use Macanta to help us with the business.
Who would have thought? So I can go in here and I can go and say, okay, I've got to make some welcome videos.
So just explain our process while it's loading.
Yeah. So our process, is there a dummy on here? No. So our process for this is we use a platform called Dub, which is like BombBomb. There's a Chrome extension here. I press record, do the video, and it gives me a URL. But when it gives you the URL, the last bit of the URL is 5 or 6 characters. Now we've been able to set it up, and not because we've done anything no one else can do. Anyone with Macanta can set this kind of thing up. We've just created the automation and everything in the system that all I do is I copy and paste those last characters of the URL. So not the whole URL, just the end. I then come in here, I can edit this field right here, I paste it in and save. That will trigger then an email to that person containing that video. And at the same time, next time I load the search, they won't be on the search because one of my criteria is that this field is empty. But you then have the option, so you can come in and edit. So I can go in here and make a change and save and do it right there and then carry on. So you can have them making phone calls and just updating a field and running through a list rather than having to go in and out of candidates. If all they're doing is making phone calls this morning, we'll just go through those people.
That was one of the aspects of Macanta as it is now, Stephen, that I mentioned on my call with you. That's in there as a result of our work with another recruitment company based in America. They wanted the owner wanted her recruiters to have the list of the people that they were working with, the opportunities they were working with, right in front of them, and just to be able to edit values on like a spreadsheet.
If you needed to sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but if I needed to download, say if I wanted to send a blanket email to all of those that on that screen,
yeah,
can you do that from that screen?
In my head, yes, it's been designed, it's just not been built yet.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
essentially what it will be when it's in place. So at the moment, you can download those results.
And then just e-shot from there.
And then just e-shot them. But the way that we're envisaging what we're going to build is that when you have the results, you'll have an email button here that gives you a modal. You write the email and you send, and it'll then send it to everyone who was on the results when you pulled the search up.
Perfect.
So yeah, so that's the stuff that we're working on. But I just wanted to show you that's where you can go and create those queries. And then an element that we've not touched on here is user management, which we can maybe do next week if we get to it, or I'll do a video on it. But our user management allows you to restrict access, again, to each of the saved searches, but I can also give someone read-only permission to one of those. So they can pull up the results, but they can't make any edits. And the same way that we have, was it in additional info, we've got two sections here. I can say, well, depending on your role, you don't need to see the second section at all. So you only see the top one. Or I can say, well, fine, for your role, you see the top one with read-write access. The bottom one, you can only see with read-only access. Or you can go and edit both of them, have read-write on both. And it's the same for the searches.
Yeah, might have a bad idea actually on one of our upcoming webinars to find one where
user management is key.
They have got that, and we so we use this one to really highlight field actions and automation on specific fields. Find a webinar where we can highlight user management.
Yeah. Cool.
Excellent. So here endeth the 5th lesson of.
Are there any more questions before we...
there is one's just popped up into Q&A. Let me have a look at that. Another great question from Eugene. If you weren't around, Eugene, I don't know what we'd do. We wouldn't have any questions to answer. Really appreciate it. He says, I'm going to answer it live. Do emails come from Macanta, or is there some facility for a domain name, etc.? Obviously, the emails that we send out come from hello@macanta.org, but we use, again, we talked about using best of breed tools. We use SendGrid as the email platform behind Macanta, and SendGrid's got the ability to send a domain authentication. So it's not automated at the moment, but inside admin, there'll be a place where you go in and you say, I want to authenticate the domain, and then you'll then get a list of the changes that you need to make on your own DNS, because that's always how that domain authentication happens. And then when you've made those changes with your DNS provider, you just come back and just say, verify domain. If the DNS records have been changed, then Macanta will be able to send the emails out as authenticated. There's nothing to stop you putting any from address in there at any time, but if you don't authenticate your domain, it will always say sent via sendgrid.com.
Yeah.
So the domain authentication just increases your domain reputation and improves your email
deliverability. And this then, every email, again, the emails are building blocks. So every email you come and build, you can have a different from address, depending on who it should come from, what the function is, what that needs to do. So, cool.
Cool. Well, we'll obviously keep in touch with you, Stephen, as you grow and go and evolve and build it. Just anytime you want to hop on a call, that's absolutely fine. For the stalwarts that have remained, I know Jean's always going to be one of them, but the few others that are still here, thanks for hanging in with us. And if you're up for it, we'll be here same time, same place next Wednesday. So
cool.
See you then.
Great.
Bye guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. See you later.